This idea was cooked up by a couple of folks, including myself and Stan Caldwell, who's in the audience here, Executive Director of Traffic 21 and Heinz College. We have been having these conversations about what is smart cities technology. Here, I'll move the slide. And smart cities technology, all the the widgets and all the great things and the sensors and the cameras. The idea is that they improve safety, they improve health, they improve all these great things, but who is it benefiting? How is it benefiting them? Where is the transparency? How can we be assured that the outcomes are equitable and trustworthy? And that issue of trust is so important, and especially at a university like Carnegie Mellon, where we're at the forefront of technology, intersection of humanity and technology. What for whom? Like, are we being inclusive? Are we being iterative and collaborative? So that's what we're going to talk about, and specifically to justice as well. Just a quick recap, Metro21, we're here on campus, and we represent 7 colleges and libraries, but we're housed here at Heinz College. We are focused on taking the 21st century of Carnegie Mellon and applying it to solve real world problems. And we do that in collaboration with municipal and equity partners, including the Department of Mobility. And we have about 20 active projects throughout the region, and more on our website and all that good stuff. So with that, so if I stand corrected, or when I introduce a panelist, they'll be able to speak and we can hear them. You got the idea? Okay. Great. So why don't we start with the people in the room for starters? Raid, would you just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure. I don't know if you guys, you don't have any mics or anything. Thank you. Sure. Can you see me here? Okay, perfect. Well, I'm optimizing for the people here because they're more important because they're here. So yeah, Raid Ghani. I'm local Carnegie Mellon. I am at Heinz and across, also in the machine learning department. And a lot of my work is sort of at the intersection of exactly those 2 buildings, is looking at using all the data related buzzwords, machine learning, AI, data science, your favorite one, and using those technologies to help governments and NGOs better do what they're supposed to do. And hopefully this conversation will get into what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to save money and then have parties with that money, or it's supposed to be more equitable and serve people that they need to serve in a way that satisfies everybody's needs rather than just the efficiency route. And so a lot of things that I've worked on they span health issues around sort of retention in care for HIV patients or lead poisoning systems that are detecting kids at risk in Chicago, to criminal justice issues that my team is working on ranging from some work in Kansas on reducing recidivism through mental health outreach programs in an equitable way. We have a randomized trial that's been running now for about 2-ish years, later, to sort of policing issues around building systems that help police departments identify officers who might be involved in shootings and justify shootings and the use of force. It can be take the same technologies we often use the other way around in a horrible way. Can we then turn them around and see how do we prevent those types of incidents from happening, to other issues around environmental and transportation and education things. So with the kind of the key focus of how do we design these systems to help us get to more equitable outcomes. Yeah, happy to talk more.
Great. Thank you. We're so honored to have Raid here, who's really we worked really hard to get you here to Carnegie Mellon, and you're just taking off like gangbusters in terms of the impact you're having on students in the region. So we're grateful to have you here. Kim.
All it took was the promise of a free lunch to get me to Carnegie Mellon today. Hi, everybody. Can everybody in the back hear me okay? And awesome. Hopefully people online can as well. My name is Kim Lucas. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning, Policy, and Permitting for the city's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And I guarantee that everybody who is in this room today has used some of the assets and resources that our department is responsible for. So we are the city agency that is responsible for providing the physical mobility to enable the economic and social mobility of the residents and visitors of the city of Pittsburgh. So our 5 primary goals are: number 1 is safety. We believe that nobody should be killed or seriously injured using our streets and trying just to get where they need to go. Our second goal has to do with accessibility, and this is often a big conversation with equity as well, is making sure that every resident in the city of Pittsburgh can get to fresh fruits and vegetables and other basic needs within 20 minutes travel time of their home and without requiring the use of a private automobile. Our remaining goals have to do with affordability. Again, a major component of equity and justice is making sure that people can afford their basic needs. So we don't want any household, regardless of their income, to have to spend more than 45% of that income on the combination of transportation, which we affect, housing, and energy. We also want to make sure, another goal is that short trips in the city of Pittsburgh can be achieved comfortably and joyfully without a car. So biking and walking. A lot of people moving themselves within Pittsburgh today are going very short distances, less than a mile. And a lot of those trips people are using automobiles. We know when people use automobiles, they increase most of the time local emissions and air pollution and therefore public health outcomes. So justice, equity, they cause congestion, and that makes it harder for everybody to kind of share this space together. And it's also just not the most fun thing to do, to drive short distances. So we try to make it comfortable and safe and joyful to get around biking, walking, scooting, and other ways. And then finally, we want to make sure that our streets reflect the pride of the city's residents. Pittsburgh has a long and rich history, and a lot of folks that are here today are people who have been here for generations upon generations. And we want to make sure that our streets are welcoming to those families and for new folks. I'm sure many of whom in this room are here because of CMU and because you're students right now. And so we want to make sure our city represents and is welcoming to everyone.
And you buried the lead is that come Friday at 5 p.m., Kim is going to be the acting director at the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So kudos to you. I say your promotion. So thank you. And she's been diving right in. Yeah, really grateful to have you. All right, we're going to try this. And Lillian, I hope that we can hear you when you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I can see you. So my name is Lillian Corral, and I'm the Director of National Strategy and Technology Innovation at the Knight Foundation. And my work really has focused on developing a smart city strategy for the foundation, but it's smart cities with a twist. Our mission at the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation is to foster more informed and engaged communities. We think that's really the hallmark of our democracy. And so when we think about the technological revolution and the way that that smart city sort of vision emerged, we really thought about what was the role of residents in all of that, of the people in these cities. And so our smart city strategy is one that's really what we call resident-centered. It's about putting people in the middle of these smart city strategy and funding initiatives that give them a voice. So for example, one investment that I'm really proud of is in the city of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is not a Knight community, but we've been able to support this work that's happening there just because it's a leading community in terms of its testing of autonomous technology. As many of you may know, in the city of Pittsburgh, there are a lot of autonomous tests. It was that first famous city with the Uber, testing pilot. But our question is, how are residents involved, engaged? What's their voice? What opportunities have they had to kind of shape and engage with these solutions? And so we've been working with the department, with the innovation mobility team in the city to really help launch initiatives where there's greater community engagement and buy-in, shaping the design. So that's just one example, but we actually work across various Knight communities and funding things around digital, things that support digital engagement, greater outreach and connection to everyone. Obviously, sometimes that includes supporting the digital divide. And then really, like I said, just thinking about the role of residents in all of this technology and how they can have a voice in designing, planning, and implementing these solutions to meet their needs and interests. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Lillian, and it's great to hear you. Marimba, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Marimba Malayans, President and CEO of the Hill Community Development Corporation. We are the lead development organization in the historic Hill District neighborhood, which is situated between two of Pittsburgh's top economic generators.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's downtown Pittsburgh. We're located between downtown Pittsburgh and the University District of Oakland, an 1,100-acre neighborhood. It's a historically African-American community, and we are interested in preserving the African-American cultural legacy in the redevelopment of the neighborhood, which means that we have to go about its redevelopment in a very intentional and deliberate manner. We are, very much focused on equity and equitable development in the redevelopment of the Hill District as a neighborhood, as a standalone neighborhood, but also as a connecting neighborhood between two of the state's top economic generators. We focus specifically on people, place, and policy. So
We can see you, Marimba. Okay.
So we focus on people, place, and policy. So we are invested and interested in building up the people while we build up the place. And of course, we do that in part by promoting equitable policy. We know that this is not sustainable work if we do not advocate for equitable development policies that have to happen on multiple levels, including local, state, and federal. And so excited to be with you today to talk about how smart cities interact with communities on the ground and some of the opportunities and consequences of what we're doing today and in the near term. Thank you.
That's fantastic. We saw you for a brief glimmering few seconds, and it was great to see you. And thank you, Lillian, as well, for joining us. We're Marimba, you let us off in a really great way. And so here's the thing. We want you to ask us questions. We want to have a dialogue, and I'm pointing to the folks in the audience. We want to hear what's on your mind. We know this is something of interest to you. We know there's 80+ folks out in the internet somewhere on the Zoom who are also interested. We have the team here, our fantastic interns, Robert and Haley and Sachin here, and then we've got Mary remote as well as Joy. So we are going to be able to get your questions here as well as those online. We are going to give priority to those in the room because you made the effort to come here. We're really grateful. And we're giving you a free lunch that you can get when you leave. Because, that's important during a lunch and learn. So with that, we're going to kick off. We did a little prep Zoom to kick off the conversation, but I really do mean that if something is burning and you want to raise a question and ask a question, you can do it on Zoom. You can also do it in here and you'll get priority here. So do the old fashioned way, raise your hand. And Robert has a mic, right?
Actually, the whole room is wired.
Okay.
So no need for a mic.
All right, awesome. So
So
cool. So you'll just, if I miss somebody, you'll let me know. So that we want it to be engaging. And also, here's the thing, we were even thinking like, do we want to have breakout groups and have more intimate discussions about this topic? So help us, we're going to have an exit survey at the end, help us design so that we can ensure that we have a very honest dialogue. So with that, I'm going to get into our first question. I'm starting with Raid, and you hinted at it a little bit in your introduction. How do you define smart cities technology? And then how do you define justice related to smart cities technology? And yes, sometimes it gives a good chuckle. So what are your thoughts on this? And then I want to be able to hear from our panelists as well. Thank you.
Yeah, how much time do we have? I mean, smart cities definition is easy, right? It's cities that don't work. Because every time we think of sort of smart, at least, when I hear the word or phrase smart cities, smart doesn't mean technology, but that's kind of how we think about it. City with technology. And more specifically, we often think about smart cities as cities with a bunch of sensors. They have lots of cameras, they have lots of other sensors. Now think of the same thing for a person. Would we call a person smart because they have lots of eyes and ears and noses and hands?
Mm-hmm.
Not really, right? That's not about being smart. Yet I think most perceptions of smart city is really you have a lot of sensors and things. And often most of those things don't really do anything for anyone. Those sensors never get used. And we all know cities where sensors have been deployed. Chicago, I was there for many years, and they spent years arguing about putting these sensors up, and now they're up, and nobody's doing anything with it. No citizen, no residents getting any benefit. So, I mean, in my mind, what a smart city should be is a city that does serve its residents, that serves it in an equitable way, and does whatever it's needed. It doesn't need to be technology, it needs to be policy, it needs to have the right people, it needs the right services. And you don't always need technology for that. You need the right policy, but then technology and data help those things, right? So in my mind, I think a smart city is one that does what's best for all of its residents in a fair and equitable way. And I think for me, justice in this case really is, and I'm not going to go into the definition of here's what justice is and equity is. We can all Google that and read the differences. The justice is really, can you set up the framework? Can you set up the infrastructure to enable that, right? So that we don't need to do additional things to get to equity, but that your things by definition are designed in a way that are just and that lead to equitable outcomes without extra effort. Unlike today, where we're going to have to figure out what do we do in addition to the policies today that are not just to make things more equitable. So ideally, we don't have to do them, and the natural process is, so trying to be controversial because the panel and we don't all want to agree on things.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I'll go to you, Kim, and then we're going to throw it to Marimba and Lillian.
I think that's ostensibly how I feel as well. From the standpoint of it's not just buying the newest whiz-bang thing and implementing the newest whiz-bang thing, it's being open to evolving your practices and your processes and recognizing how that evolution needs to probably look different than it did 50 or 100 years ago with regards to who is catalyzing the change, who's a part of the discussion, how you're engaging the public to make sure you're actually serving the public. And so I agree that it's not all about just making sure you've got the smartest signals out there or the newest micromobility device that does the coolest things, but it's about looking at all the needs of the city and making sure that you're willing to adjust how you've done them forever to do them just a little bit better.
I love it. I love it. And that's our mantra as well. And that's why we love pilot projects that are time bound and can be evaluated and that are iterative and user centered. Because that's how you figure it out. How are you going to know if you don't try, but you also have to be thoughtful and intentional. And it's complicated and it's sometimes not pretty, but if you can be transparent about it, hopefully better outcomes. Lillian, I'm going to throw it to you. What are your thoughts on the definition of smart cities and justice?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to what Raid or Kim have added is that, with the smart cities sort of relies on this theory that something is inefficient and needs to be optimized. And I think what we've clearly seen what many of us know is that there are a lot of reasons why things are not working properly in the world, and it's not just inefficiency. And I'm going to throw out the term institutional racism, because I think that's part of, what we'll get into today, which is a lot of the reason why our policies work the way that they do is because there's racist structures and there's institutional racism and bias within those structures already embedded in there. And so I think part of the only thing I'll add is I think what we're coming to terms with and what we need to come to terms with as a society and as technologists is that this technology was meant to, was really created with this idea of optimization, but it's not an optimization problem per se, not always. And so, as Raid alluded to, then how do you actually design it in a way to deal with racism? That's a whole other design effort than, building lights that can sense heat and optimize for when there's more heat versus less heat to reduce energy consumption, right? And so that's the only thing I'll add there.
Perfect. That was great, Lillian. Thank you. And Marimba, your thoughts on this?
Hi. One of the things that first of all, I want to, edify all of the comments that have been made so far, but also really, add in there that, a city can't be smart if it's not maximizing and optimizing its human potential. And how we do that means that we have to be using the technology in service to addressing our most complex human challenges and socioeconomic challenges as well. And so that would be one of the things that I'd like to make sure is centered when we're talking about smart technology, not necessarily just purely from the lens of optimizing what is important to the established power brokers, but to the needs of those who are suffering from either poverty, structural racism, and other issues like that we still are struggling to move past as a society. And so I'll add that, and I'm sure lots more will come out in the conversation.
Awesome, Marimba, you're spot on. And actually, something I've been kind of playing around with is how can you be a smart city if you have food insecurity? How can you be a smart city if you have homelessness? How can you be, let's redefine what smart is. Let's re-own what a smart city is, right? So maybe that could be our aspirations as opposed to the widgets and the sensors and the technology. It's more about how you're improving.
And I think
quality of life.
smart doesn't have any values, right? Smart is kind of a valueless term. And I think we have to figure out what values to add to smartness, because a lot of really evil people are also really smart, and they use that smartness to do horrible things. And a lot of really, not evil people might not have the right, training and experience and tools in front of them to have a positive impact. So how do we inject values in a smart city?
Right. So yes, we're also talking about connected, sort of this idea of not just smart, but connected to this idea. And that's why, mobility is so critical, economic and physical mobility. Any other thoughts? And audience, anything? Haley?
I just have a question from the Zoom room when it's ready, when it's time.
Okay.
I will raise my hand.
Well, first, I want to see if there's
Yes.
anybody here in the audience who has a burning question. Okay, great. State your name, introduce yourself.
I'm Sean Penfield. I'm a first year in the Masters of Information Security Policy Management here at Hines. So I feel like if you went up to the a random person on the street here in Pittsburgh or any city, the term smart city would invoke a mid 20th century, what they thought today would be, with flying cars and everything being automated and stuff. So and a lot of innovation and change is founded on investment from the community that you're injecting that into. So what do you guys think are some incremental changes or smaller things that could get buy-in from the community? Because this sort of also butts up against certain communities' inherent trust of the government, because that you can't just throw sensors and cameras at a community and they might think, is that camera or sensor really here to help me, or is it here to institutional racism? So what are some incremental things that can inject value that can sort of get buy-in from those communities?
That's a great question. And I'm going to have Kim answer it, because I think this speaks to the work that you have been doing incrementally, kind of to your goals of Vision Zero. How can technology help with things like that?
So I think kind of dialing it back a little bit is starting not with the technology and identifying technology for technology's sake.
Right.
This seems like it could be a good idea and it can make people's lives better, but it's looking at a problem and saying, okay, and asking people, what is your problem that you're experiencing today? I think one, and it's not 100% safety related, but everything we do in the public space ultimately has a safety impact and implication. So we have a pilot that we're about to release in a couple months with a company called Automotus.
Right.
It's for basically smart curbside management. You've probably seen a delivery vehicle double park sometime, right? You've probably seen a FedEx truck or UPS or somebody else that is maybe blocking a bike lane or blocking a different type of lane of travel, or maybe even parking on the sidewalk. Part of the reason that vehicles behave that way, which is not in compliance with our rules of how they should behave, is because the right way for them to behave isn't available. The curb is parked up, even if there's a loading zone that's signed there, maybe there's some cars parked there because that car driver was taking their chance that day with getting a parking ticket. And so by working with an organization like Automotus, who granted the city a $100,000 pilot recently, we're going to enable certain zones to be better enforced through camera technology, so smart asterisk cameras, but that are going to be focused on the vehicles themselves to get an idea. And also people will eventually be able to reserve that curb to say, hey, I'm making a delivery at this location on this day. I want to make sure that curb's available to me. I'm going to pay you a small fee because I want to commit to being able to use that curb, and I want you to commit that curb to be free for me. With the hope being that we will eventually have streets that are operating better, because when we get the curb working better and we get these delivery vehicles to the curb, then their businesses are improved. So a smarter way for them to operate. The safety of our streets is improved because now you're not on your bike driving around a double parked large box truck and going into an opposing lane of traffic. And hopefully the problem of businesses not getting their deliveries on time, of businesses incurring additional fees because of parking tickets, of cyclists and motorists having to break laws to go around those illegally parked vehicles, those are the problems that we were hopefully will be solving. So I guess